Now, in a recent interview with Screen Rant, Matthew Vaughn, who's probably most well known for films like Kingsman and X-Men First Class, he was asked, other than his own franchises, which one he'd potentially like to work in or on. And as you can probably figure out by the title or thumbnail of this video, or the fact that I'm covering this, the one he picked was Star Wars, and he had a rather interesting idea for what he'd do with it, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way. Anyway, he said as follows in response to the question. But for me now, if someone asked me what would you do, for me to get back into the world of somebody else's characters and other franchises, I mean, I was joking, I said this as a joke, and now yeah, maybe I would do it. If they wanted to reboot Star Wars, set the story with the Skywalkers, and then I'll go, hey, that will be interesting, because for me, it's gotta be something so bold, so different, and so brave. They said, you can't do that. I was like, there's been 3 Spider-Mans, Bonds, like, what are you talking about? Why can't that happen? I don't control Star Wars, but I would do something big, brave, and with the great characters. I want to see Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, and Chewie doing their stuff, not some distant cousin. Who cares? Alright, and to start it out here, I gotta point out that there are some pretty big differences between, say, doing Spider-Man and or Batman over and over again, having a few different iterations of them on the big screen now, and doing something like Star Wars all over again, or rebooting and recasting the original trilogy with all new actors for those characters. With perhaps the biggest one being that when it comes to comic book characters, you're taking them from a different medium entirely. You're taking them from the static pages of a comic book and putting them on the big screen and turning them into a live-action character, which in itself is almost like this kind of dream come true for some longtime fans of the character. Longtime fans who now get to see them in a whole new way. Not to mention, as anyone who reads comics knows, these characters already sort of get rebooted all the time, or just have subtle changes made to them from writer to writer, and writer changes can be quite frequent. Batman hasn't existed in the comics for almost 85 years now without having been sort of rebooted and reinvented numerous times over the years. Not drastically, of course, he's still basically the same character, but there's been enough changes made along the way that he is, in some ways, a different one. With Star Wars, or those original characters, they started on film, and for a lot of people, those are the characters. It's not so easy to recast a Han Solo and have people feel they're one and the same, as Disney even found out not too long ago. In other words, in comics, it's kind of the norm to see the same character in different ways, or played by different actors, or just different iterations of it. In Star Wars, not that all fans are against it, or that I'm entirely closed-minded to this idea of recasting any character ever, but the actor kind of becomes the character in many cases. I guess the best and simplest way I could ever put it is that Tobey Maguire became a version of Spider-Man, but Mark Hamill made Luke Skywalker who and what he is. And thus it wasn't as hard for, say, a Tom Holland to step into the role of Spider-Man, not as hard as it would be for someone else to try and become Luke Skywalker. And like I just said, I'm not entirely closed to the idea of someone else ever playing Luke Skywalker. A lot of people love the idea of Sebastian Stan, probably most well known for playing Winter Soldier in the MCU. They'd like to see him play Luke in the Mandalorian time period of Star Wars, and I certainly don't hate that idea. And it'd probably be better than the CGI Luke we have been getting, at least until AI technology gets crazy enough to truly duplicate Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker in a way that almost is indistinguishable from the real thing. But anyway, another problem with the idea of rebooting Star Wars is that many consider the originals perfection, and the mere idea of trying to redo those films, redoing the Lucas films, they view it as nothing short of blasphemy. And though yeah, I'm more or less cool with recasting characters in order for them to be used in different time periods, I'm kinda in the blasphemy camp when it comes to redoing the original trilogy, or wiping it away and just restarting Star Wars again with those same characters in a similar, if not almost identical story, which I think is kind of what he was implying. I just don't see the point in that. I personally would much rather just keep on watching the original films till the day I die than watch remakes of them. You may feel differently, but that's my opinion on that. And if you do want to sort of reboot Star Wars, I think there are much better ways of doing it than just using old characters to tell, again, the same sorts of stories all over again, or the same story over again. I think one option that I've discussed a lot and won't go too into here again is to just go back to the old Republic era. You carve out a nice little chunk of time that was completely unexplored by the old expanded universe, and you do basically whatever the hell you want with Star Wars there. You can have your epic scale battles between Jedi and Sith. You can have the spectacle that, yeah, Star Wars is kind of known for and that most people, especially the more general audience, that they kind of want or expect out of it. And you also have the freedom to, more or less, do whatever you want with the story and the characters you create. And I would suggest creating new characters, not using already established ones like Revan, for example. That's just going to go badly. If you do something like this, you don't have to worry too much about aligning with what Lucas Star Wars is thousands and thousands of years down the road on the timeline, and if you avoid those pre-established characters like I was just recommending, and if you don't do anything just stupid in general, you won't have fans like me who are calling you out for not getting these characters right. Again, you can basically do whatever you want, short of blowing up the galaxy or doing anything too extreme that would somehow affect the story thousands of years later. The other, and in my opinion, better option if you want to reboot Star Wars, and ironically, we were just talking about this the other night on my Discord server, but you just take Star Wars far, far into the future, 1,000 years or more even, and you create a whole new saga, right down to calling your first movie in it another Episode 1, which personally I think gets people, the more casual fan and general audience member, as well as potentially the more hardcore fan, you get them excited that you're starting a whole new epic story, which I think many feel is missing in Star Wars these days, or with what we see in the Disney Plus shows. We're lacking this sort of epic feeling usually, and I'm not saying it's always bad because of that. I've liked some, if not a good portion, of these more appetizer-sized stories that we've gotten on Disney Plus and elsewhere from Lucasfilm since the Disney era began. But I think, and this is just what I think, but I think most people want Star Wars to be big and epic, not small scale and small stakes, which is kind of unfortunate because, yeah, Star Wars can also be quite good on the smaller scale, I think. The first couple seasons of The Mandalorian are proof of that, and many loved it. Or at least they loved watching Grogu and Din Djarin. As I've argued before, I'm not sure how many Star Wars fans that show actually made, as much as it just made fans of those two characters. Anyway, that's what I think you do if you want to reboot Star Wars. I think you just create a fresh new saga and even give it episode numbers so people understand this is going to be big, this is going to be epic. Making sure to, have a good story in place before you kick the thing off. Because this would, in theory, or my idea would be, to span multiple trilogies over the next few decades. Along with this, along with having your story outlined at the very least, you also want to have your themes hammered out as well. And not preachy ones that, say something about the modern world, but a timeless tale that says something about the human spirit or condition. One that will be as relevant 100 years from now as it is today. Not unlike the original trilogy is still good today and why it doesn't need to be remade. The story is as good now as it was back then. And so I really just think you forever leave the original trilogy alone. I feel like only bad things can come out of trying to remake that. That you're going to have fans, again, like me, who are going to compare the new with the old, and barring nothing short of a miracle, they're going to end up liking the old stuff better, and at best, they're not going to hate your new stuff, or the new version, but they're certainly not going to love it like they did before. I think sometimes, maybe oftentimes, or usually, if not pretty much every time, things become a classic for a reason, because there was something about them that was truly special and cannot be duplicated. That they captured the proverbial lightning in a bottle, and that though sure, a remake of it may not be bad, it may even be good, it's likely never going to be as good as that original though. It's likely not going to be worth watching over the original either. And oftentimes when they do these remakes, they just come off feeling like cash grabs. And so yeah, don't do this. Don't remake the original trilogy. Not that Disney was actually thinking about doing this, mind you. This is just something that Matthew Vaughn threw out there, but not something Disney and Lucasfilm should seriously consider in my opinion. Not when new generations deserve new stories, and the ability to go back and appreciate the ones from previous generations without them being updated for modern times. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think. Do you agree with me, or maybe you disagree? Would you like to see the original trilogy rebooted, or would you rather see Star Wars be rebooted by going to a brand new time and place? Or maybe you got an entirely different idea for the future of Star Wars. Whatever you think though, leave a comment below, let's talk some Star Wars, and until next time, thanks for watching.